The questions log, week 15. Fifth day in Kondak prison. Most of the time I don't spend in meditation. I spend staring at the reverent portrait of Black Adam thoughtfully placed opposite my cell bars, transfixed by whatever's going on with his hairline. The rest of my thoughts are with Montoya. Was it wrong of me to bring her here? I asked if she was ready, and I presumed I knew the answer. But we're long past turning back now. All that remains is to see this through. Right now, though, I only wish I had better company here in my own cell. But no such luck. I'm locked in here with me. This is 52 Pickup. This is 52 Pickup. Hello and welcome. It's a podcast about the greatest comic you've never heard of. I'm professional comic book expert Alex Jaffe.
And I'm Gita. As every week I have been previously, I am still Gita.
You can't help but be Gita. You've achieved your perfect form.
I'm actually watching Dragon Ball Z. David's never seen it before, so we're watching it from the beginning.
No?
It's just hard not to tell him about all the things he's about to experience. Like meeting Vegeta when he's evil.
Oh, it's so good.
You just don't know all of the stuff that's about to happen, and I'm very excited.
Short King.
Yes.
I've actually been revisiting Dragon Ball Z myself in the manga. I started when the news of Toriyama passed. I was like, I gotta go back to the roots, and it's so good in there. Like,
it's really good.
It really doesn't come across, like, as much as I loved Dragon Ball Z, the anime, growing up, just the amount of detail, the kinetic action that goes on in the manga itself, you're only really getting like 50% of that in the show. And like to the very end, I think the last thing Toriyama ever wrote was an acceptance speech for a Lifetime Achievement Award in animation. And it basically boiled down to, I don't know why you're giving me this. I'm not an animation guy. I'm a comics guy. And that was something I really respected. So like, well, if I want to honor Toriyama, then maybe I should go back to the comics. But either way, he left an indelible impact on animation and comics and video games. Basically every element of culture that he touched, he changed forever. And I know we're all us millennials in our 30s are kind of going through that right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're catching David up on that.
Yeah, you know, growing up Orthodox, you don't get a lot of opportunities to watch Dragon Ball Z. So
I kind of had to sneak away. The most frustrating thing growing up Orthodox myself watching Dragon Ball Z was sometimes you would have to miss an episode because it was intersecting with a Jewish holiday.
Yep.
So you would have to be entirely reliant on the next time on Dragon Ball Z and last time on Dragon Ball Z bumpers to figure out what happened in the missing episode.
The narrator does a really good job, honestly. So,
oh yeah, the GOAT.
Yeah.
The best character is the narrator.
Oh,
he was
fantastic.
my guy.
Yes.
So I think we should talk talent before we get into any specific facet of this particular issue. And I've got something special planned. I actually got talent for us to talk to directly in the studio.
We're not just talking about talent. We're talking to talent.
And with talent. Please welcome the main colorist for the entire 52 series, not to mention Infinite Crisis, Batman Hush, All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, and maybe my all-time favorite superhero comic, Kurt Busiek's Astro City. Alex Sinclair is in the studio. Welcome, Alex.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. This is fun. I can't believe I'm the first one you're talking to.
Well, hopefully we could open up a room, you know, for any of the other creators here. As I mean, 52 is like an embarrassment of riches. And one of the things that is so wonderful about it is just how expressive and beautiful the art is. I have a lot of specific questions about this particular issue, about your process, but Jaffe is so excited. I'm so excited too.
I mean, like, the first thing I need to know is, how do you consistently color a weekly comic series? How do you work with all the different artists who keep going back and forth and all the scripts that must have been coming at you as fast as your fax machine could print them? What was going on back in 2006?
It was funny because that was the year that I had left DC to go full freelance. One of the things that DC and I agreed to kind of part ways as far as employee and employer, but they said, look, we have the series. called 52. It's going to be a weekly book. And I remember sitting in the editorial meeting, which as part of the talent, even a colorist, you never sit in those meetings. And so, but they called me into this meeting and everybody was there. So all the editors, and at the time it was Paul Levitz and was running the show. And someone brought that up. They're like, are we good with Alex coloring every week? Can he pull it off? And Levitz just kind of jumped in and said, well, I think if anyone can pull it off, it's Alex. For me, it was more of a, can I pull that off and still continue to work on Astro City was still coming out. I think in 2006, I was working on the Batman title still.
Wow.
So, and we were doing we were finishing off the Red Hood stuff in Batman at that time. And I had these other projects in hand, and so my thing was like, I could do 20 pages. I feel like I don't have to put in 8 hours of work a week, because I was working at Wildstorm, and then I was also coloring freelance. And I was doing about 2-3 books a month that way.
Oh, wow.
So DC was like, you're going to go freelance, but we're going to make you busier than you've ever been.
Right. And that was, with my contract, because I signed an exclusive contract, and it was like I had to color like 48 books a year. And
so you were already doing a book a week.
Right. And so it was a huge number, but there was a cool little bonus clause that if I hit the number, it'd kick in like an extra bunch of cash. I was like, yeah, I'll take the 52 books.
That's an easy way to hit my number. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's 48 minus 52? Looking pretty good.
Yeah.
That's right. I can slack off for 4 issues.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it was fun. I like that the format of it, as I think, helped me in that. At the time, books were 22 pages long, but the way Didio sold it to me was like, look, it'll be 20 pages, and the last 2 pages are like origin stories. And so if you're feeling slammed, we can always send those 2 pages to someone else. And what the funny thing is that those 2 pages were the coolest thing. Because of the talent that they were bringing in to do hey, Ivan Reich, do you want to do a 2-page story of Martian Manhunters? Like, who's going to say no to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I told him, like, I'd rather do the little 2-pagers at that point.
So you really just got thrust into this environment where it's just like an embarrassment of riches in terms of talent that you're connecting with. What was the most, I don't want to say fun, because work is always work, but like, what was the moment where you're like, I can't believe I'm fucking doing this?
Well, and initially that was the thing. They're like, we have 4 writers, 1 layout artist, 10 pencilers, 10 inkers, and you. And I'm like, okay. That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, seriously.
It's like, thanks for just leaving me out there on my own. It was cool. It's funny because I was timing it out, and it was the first time that I had worked with Jeff and Grant and Greg and Mark, period.
Wow.
Within my DC career. Because, I'd been doing a bunch of other stuff, but not these guys we hadn't crossed paths. And obviously I did a ton more stuff with Jeff and a couple other things with Grant. But it ended up that these were the only projects I did with Greg and Mark.
Wow.
Really directly. But, it's like, who's going to say no to working with those 4 writers?
Absolutely not. Yeah. You really got thrown in the deep end, but it's like in an extremely cool way. Like those sharks are very sick.
Yeah.
Yes, the deep end of an Olympic swimming pool.
Right. If one of them is having a bad week, then there's 3 other guys that are just, they're all heavy hitters.
Yeah. Yeah. You're always getting something really exciting to put colors on top of really weird stuff also in the book.
Yeah.
Was there any solidarity with Keith Giffen? Because Giffen was also kind of trucking out the art every single week. So I imagine he was also in a position to be like, yeah, I know this is brutal.
Keith ended up being the one who did the most work in the series, because he ended up doing the layouts for the entire series. And I, in the end, I think ended up coloring close to 40 of the 52. A little bit more than 40. And so he ended up doing the most, like, pages, you could say, of the layouts. And I think that's really what helped the series the most. He really unified the army of pencilers that the series brought.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that the storytelling had a very unique flow to it that was consistent no matter who was drawing it because it's already there for them.
Yeah. So working with a bunch of different pencilers didn't present a huge challenge for you because you had the Keith Giffen layouts guiding everybody.
Yeah, and God bless him. I was such a huge fan of Keith that I was like, asking Dan, let Keith draw one of the 2 pages and let me do it because I'd never worked with him, collaborated with him before. I mean, obviously we did 40 plus issues together of this, but it wasn't just Keith, right? It was Keith with someone else kind of going over him.
Yeah.
Now, something I keep noticing is that as great as the colors are in this series, the colors on the covers in particular are phenomenal. Every one of these pieces is a frameable work of art. And I'd like to know what goes into coloring a cover as opposed to coloring an interior.
Well, and this was especially so, one of my favorite collaborations with J.G. Jones. My God.
Oh, he's the best.
The goat.
My favorite part of working on the series are the covers.
It shows.
And so it was cool because he wanted each cover to represent something different. And so he had tons of reference. He had tons of like, this is what I'm going for. This is the era I'm going for. This is what I'm thinking of. And he'd let me kind of contribute to and add my 2 cents to it. But, oh man, I love doing the covers. And we were always way ahead. And so when I started the first issue, I had already done like 8 to 10 covers.
Wow.
And so I kind of knew what was coming in the series just because the covers, a lot of them were very, very revealing.
Yeah. Some of them are like red herrings, but most of them are like, literally, this is what's going to happen this week.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh. So it kind of got me excited. Even if I was kind of hitting a rut, that next cover was like, oh man, I can't wait to get to that. And so that kind of drove my creativity.
Wow. I really like about the covers, like you said, there's a different mood and tone that J.G. Jones is trying to hit each week. I really like when they do like the style parody, like they did the communist realism art for one cover with Steele swinging his big hammer, and then there's another cover that looks like just like literally exactly like an issue of Newsweek from the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
Was there any kind of like particular style of cover that stood out to you as particularly creative or interesting to color?
Well, a lot of those that you point out, and then sometimes it's the ones that kind of featured almost nobody. So there's a Red Tornado cover with an Aborigine guy in the Australian outback.
Yeah.
And it was cool because as long as I just worried about keeping the tornado's head red, I could do whatever I want with the cover. So I went very, very artistic with it. And that's one of the ones that JG said, just do your thing, man. This one's free for you.
Hell yeah, that rules.
That one stands out. And then probably my favorite cover of all of them is one that never saw print.
Oh, man.
Oh, do tell.
The cover to the first trade paperback. JG drew it as a Drew Struzan poster.
Oh, wow.
And it was fantastic. And I went nuts because I'm a huge Struzan fan. I mean, I went nuts on it. So much so that Legal kicked it back and said, it looks too much like a Star Wars poster. But it's an ode to it. It's not like exactly like it.
Yeah.
Like, no, it looks like Struzan painted. I'm like, great. That's what we were going for.
Like, thank you.
And thank you.
Does JG still have those pencils somewhere? Like, do you have a copy of that image?
We would love to see an image of that.
So I fully colored it. JG and I were both really ticked off. And then JG sent me the inked piece as a gift.
Oh, that's so great.
When we were all said and done, he said, here, you probably did the best job on this cover of any of the other ones. And I'm proud of what we did. And I'm so pissed that we didn't see it in print. And so he sent me the ink. So I own the original of it. And I, of course, have the color file for it, too, because it really was really cool. Because when I sent it back to JG, he was like, oh, man, like this is perfect. And then he kind of said, it's like, man, they better not say anything about it being too perfect. And sure enough, it's the only cover that they kicked back and said, we need to change this.
It's too bad. Because that's totally like the epic tone that the comic takes too. Like there's a grand sense of adventure, like all of those movie posters that Struzan painted that, like, I don't know, it feels very iconic and eternal. You can feel the star wipes in the comic book.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, edited by George Lucas, 100. Yeah. One more thing I want to do before we go on to the issue itself. I want to get a couple hot takes from you on the record. First of all, who's got the best color scheme in the DC universe?
In the DC universe, so Batman is probably the easiest and hardest guy to color.
Yeah.
because he's got to blend in and stand out all at once.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
When you put it that way, that actually sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's Superman, who wears the primary colors as his suit.
Mhm.
To not make him jump out of every panel of every page, that's what's hard about his colors.
Yeah.
And then you got Wonder Woman, who's got two kinds of metal, leather,
Mhm.
most skin in the universe exposed.
Yeah.
And skin's probably the hardest to color, mostly because we know what it should look like.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when you do a portrait, you do someone's face, you do someone's hand, you know when it's off because we all have one of those, right? And so we see one of those every day.
Yeah.
And so when you get a character that is about 75% skin, it makes it that much harder. And now you got to put skin next to leather.
Yeah.
Technically skin, but not really.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And then metal, and then a shiny little rope. So she's hard to color, but I think to me, the challenge is what makes it fun.
Mhm.
Oh.
One that makes me want to definitely do it right. And so I think the three of them are my favorite to color. I like the color like Hawkman because of his wings.
Yeah. Oh, a different material also. Like wings reflect light and diffract light in a totally different way. Feathers.
Yeah. And I love doing wildlife. So when I'm not doing comic books and I'm going to paint for myself, it's going to be an animal.
Oh, cool.
Some kind of wildlife. And it's going to be in watercolors or something chaotic. And so getting characters like Hawkman is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever any kind of crypto shows up, crypto gets all the love because it's an animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You brought up Superman, and I got to ask you about the great Superman trunks debate. Some people think it doesn't look good on him. Others say you need that splash of red to break up the blue. From a colorist's perspective, does the underwear go on the outside?
I like it. I think it's great.
Me
I think
too.
it's a great classic suit. But also, that 52 suit was super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I love the collar on it. I love that we went. I think maybe I like it because I had input in the color schemes for the suits.
Oh, well, it's your baby a little bit, right?
Right,
So you
makes
get
sense.
you feel like you own it.
Yeah, you worked with Jim Lee for a long time.
Yeah. We've been doing this. Well, he's the guy that hired me into the industry 31 years ago.
Wow.
And so we did it together at Wildstorm, and then when DC took over, we started doing DC characters. I started working exclusively with him because in the past we had a coloring department, and we kind of split coloring issues that Jim drew, and then it was the Stan Lee Wonder Woman book when it was just Jim Scott, and I.
Oh, I remember that.
Wow.
And so 25 years ago is when we started doing that.
Wow. Yeah, that Just Imagine project.
So the color scheme, it was one of those things like, hey, can we go darker on the blue with Superman and darker on the red so it looks a little bit more in tune with the times now, kind of a thing. And
yeah.
That was the influence. I mean, Wonder Woman was wearing pants initially for New 52.
I remember seeing some sketches with Wonder Woman with pants. Yeah.
I thought the pants was an okay look. I was not mad about the pants.
I liked it. I thought it looked cool.
Yeah.
But everybody had a cow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they want to think about the outfits in terms of cosplayability also, right? So people love wearing the leotard when they do cosplay, so they can't have their flagship character with pants on anymore.
I know, right?
Speaking of those Newsweek style covers, we got a great one for this issue, 52 number 15. A very
Oh, I sincerely love this issue's cover so much. I don't know, this is a dumb thing I think that I really like about watercolors, but I love the rocks. I think they look so good.
The rocks do look great.
To me, one of these are harder to color because there's not a lot there, right? It's rocks and goggles.
Yes.
And then the dude in the goggles. And that's it. That's all you got. And so it's like, okay, I got to make this jump off the shelf. And so, you go for the dull colors on everything except the goggles, and that's what gets you.
Yeah, that gold really makes it pop, seeing the entire city and supernova reflected in them with like blood splatters.
Thinking about it, you look right in the colors here, and it's yellow, blue, and red, which are the primary colors of the Superman suit.
Right. What I was thinking of was this calls back to in 1993 during the Death of Superman craze that just arrested the entire industry. DC put out this one shot called News Time, which was a fake magazine. set in the DC universe itself, covering the death of Superman as if it were a real event. And you see like Superman's cape kind of draped on the ground, and it's very evocative of this particular image here.
I have no idea. I should reread The Death of Superman. That's a good book.
Death of Superman is wild.
I still have a couple of those in polybagged.
Wow.
Because I was still a fan when that came out. Yeah, I wasn't a pro yet.
Wow. I'm very curious. I mean, you've told us a little bit about your career history, and I'm sure it'll come up in conversation as we keep going. But it is so strange to be a fan and then enter an industry, I'll say. And comic books seem to have a lot of that.
Well, and I think you have to be a fan of it to really honestly thrive in it, but survive in it. Because there's going to be days and weeks where it's just, man, if I see one more cape, I'm going to kill somebody. But
you don't do it for the money.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
You have to love it so much that you wake up the next day and you go, today we're coloring Batman again. All right, let's do this.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. But before we dig into this issue, also, I just want to say, as a big time Booster Gold fan, when I read this, like way back in the day when I was like 16, this issue made me so upset, which for reasons that listeners will understand throughout the issue, I was like screaming, crying, throwing up in the parlance of internet users of today. I was mad. I was mad.
Gita, what if I told you that behind the scenes, Keith and the writers called this issue the Frank Grimes issue? That's something I discovered in my research.
So funny.
Where Supernova is Homer Simpson and Booster is losing his mind.
That's exactly it. That's exactly the scenario that's going on here. Now I read it as an adult and I can appreciate how funny the script is. It is laugh a minute, just like Three Stooges type stuff for Booster Gold. He just can't win.
Yeah, in the original draft of the ending of this issue, when we get to it, Booster Gold is literally saying, "Hey everyone, check me out, I'm Supernova." And then the end happens.
Oh my God.
They redrafted that.
I've only read 52 in script form. I have never read the books themselves.
Wow.
And that's
no
true
kidding.
of about 98% of the work that I do. I read it in script form, and so everything's there anyway. Because a lot of the scripts already have the dialogue in them. And so I've read it in its worded form and colored it in its visual form. And so I figure I don't need to I pick it up and I flip through it to make sure that the book looks good visually.
Yeah, that all coheres. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I agreed to do this and you said we're discussing issue 15, it's like, I guess I should read it. I mean, I lived it, but that was, so many years ago. And so it's funny because I reread it and there's like you said, little things that are there that are funny, like calling Skeet's mother halfway through the issue. Little things like that they're super funny.
Yeah, man.
And so now I think you guys inspired me to go back and reread the whole thing.
Oh man.
Especially since DC, I just got a box of the reprinting 52 in paperback form, but it's going to be in 2 tomes instead of 4.
Oh.
Yeah, I've seen they've reprinted it as 4, as 2, and as 1. I have the big heavy omnibus that I had you sign when I met you last year.
Mine's in here somewhere. I just didn't want to pick up the big fat thing and read it.
Oh no, it's not for reading. It's for book shelving.
No. Yep. Like a week or 2 ago, I got a box with the 52s, and I thought, oh, we're doing this again?
Yep.
Yeah. Here we go.
So now I'm glad they are, because now I can just wait for box 2 to show up so I can read the whole thing.
Perfect. Yeah, my friend one day texted me and he was like, "Oh, I got all of the currently available Berserk deluxe editions, but I don't want them. Do you want this enormous, really heavy banker's box full of Berserk deluxe editions that I got for free?" And I said yes, and now they're all sitting in a huge banker's box, like 3 feet to my left.
Wow.
Yeah. They're gorgeous, but they're not for reading. They are very heavy. No.
No, not at all.
That was one thing that bothered Alan Moore for a long time after he quit DC. They kept sending him physical copies of everything DC released. He's like, "I'm never going to read these. I have nowhere to put these. Stop it."
You could just make a small set of all the packages that he's gotten.
It just really amuses me to imagine just like a library of hardcovers showing up on his doorstep every month,
shaking his fist at the sky like an angry wizard,
like a flaming bag of dog turds there.
Yeah.
Oh man.
A little flamethrower just for that.
Yeah. Booster Gold is not having a much better week than Alan Moore does when he receives a free shipment of books from DC
he's having
Comics.
about the reaction that I would expect Alan Moore to would have to receiving a new shipment of DC stuff. My favorite panel, and there's a triptych basically of in the first one, he's getting contract termination, and he is, what is that, spraying it with spray paint, it looks like?
Yeah, he's spraying the Ferris Aircraft logo off of his suit because Ferris just dropped their sponsorship.
Yes, and then the next is on top of a bunch of bills, there's a News Time magazine with a supernova, and he's doodling on the cover, which is very cute, giving him a mustache, putting a dagger in his head. But the best one is the last one, where he's browsing the Daily Planet, and he's so mad about supernova being on the news that he's taking a water bottle and is pouring it over his laptop.
Now, what I really want to shout out about this panel in particular is that when they show you a newspaper in a comic book, it's so easy to put like a lorem ipsum in place of all the actual text. But the writers actually took the time to fill out all of the text of the articles on this screen. And if you read them, it's hilarious. Like you see that Bibbo Bibowski has a 15% higher approval rate than Booster Gold.
Those are great. Perp Music, since you brought it, is the one guy who said, I will never write gibberish for newspaper articles, especially for Astro City. He's like, we have to talk about the city at all times. So whenever we do newspaper articles, it was actual stuff that he would write.
Yeah.
No, it totally makes sense. And I think especially for 52, it does make Metropolis feel like a very concrete place here. Like, I get a sense that the people who work at the Daily Planet are actually doing things, as opposed to other Superman comics where I'm like, they just hang out.
Yeah, I feel like Busiek and Mark Waid are kindred spirits in that regard. They just do not cut corners. If they want you to make it feel like a lived-in world, and this is a big part of that.
Yeah,
exactly. And so from then on, he spoiled newspaper articles from me in comics, because whenever I saw gibberish, I said, "Oh man, someone's slacking."
Yeah.
They don't care about this as much as I do.
Yeah.
You don't want that. There's a little column on the side about Lex Luthor being cleared of all the charges against him because it was another multiverse Lex Luthor, as we saw earlier in the series. So he's got that going for him. And that takes us to day 5, where everything else in the issue happens.
Right.
Yeah. So one big thing I wanted to ask, because it's the thing that's about to happen in this comic, Booster is sitting around, he's sad, he's upset, he's complaining to Skeets. He's like, nobody likes me anymore, and I'm not famous, and Supernova is famous, and I just like this. And he's trying to get one last big hurrah. And it turns out that there is one happening. There is this giant sea monster that is dropping on down into the middle of Metropolis that's rampaging around. I love this monster, and I love how good it looks so wild. And I gotta ask, when you're given something totally non-real in the middle of a sort of like a very concrete reality, like a cityscape, what direction do you think of to go for colors? Like, it's like all cool toned, which works with the nighttime scene, but it's also like that bright magenta pink is so incredible. I love it.
Yeah. I love the 5 tongues.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the thought process is we're in Metropolis, and I usually light Metropolis with gold light, whereas Gotham City gets no light or blue light. And so with Metropolis being gold or warm colored, I went for not just cool colors on the creature, but again, just like what animal on Earth has pink and purple on it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love the starfish in the mouth. That is the coolest thing.
That is the coolest part,
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, was that a Sean Mall decision, or was that Keith Giffen, or was it in the script?
No clue.
It looks a lot like the Watchmen squid.
Yes.
It really, really does look a lot like the Watchmen squid. You went a different direction in the color treatment there. I think the Watchmen squid is like a lot of acid green, but you still get that vibe from the creature design, where it's just sort of like, here's another situation in which a giant squid-like monster was in the middle of a big city.
We get the title drop, Outshined, for obvious reasons. And it had me wondering, like, when do you use outshined versus outshone? Was there a debate over that?
That was a writer thing. It was decided outside of my...
I think that was the right call. But yeah, we get Sean Mall and Tom Nguyen are back on this issue from 52 number 9. They're going to be drawing the massive fight scene that's going to take up almost the rest of this entire issue.
I think the pencils on this particular issue are really gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of really good faces in this issue, which is pretty essential.
It's a cool Doug Mankey style that I gravitate towards since I worked with Doug before.
Oh, word. Oh, that's awesome. I just think it's really pretty. In the next scene that happens right after the reveal and the title drop, we are moving to Kondak, where Renee Montoya is not having a good time.
I don't think she had a good time in this whole series.
She comes out the other side, okay?
Yeah.
But she's the one that just takes it every issue.
Exactly.
Like, oh man, someone buy her flowers, please.
If you're a Buffy fan, it's very much what Faith from Buffy. We're just bad things, just like a boulder rolling down a hill. Bad things continue to happen, and she's like, "Here I go."
I will say this entire Greg Rucka storyline is Rucka's homage to Denny O'Neill's The Question series. And similarly, in The Question, Vic Sage was eating shit absolutely every single issue. So it's kind of Renee going through the same trials here.
But that's like a noir fiction trope, right? Yeah. Like the detective really has to take his licks all the way through. And of course, like especially an escape from an unlawful imprisonment or a foreign prison type situation is such a pulp novel. Especially, I love the gag that they're about to do, which is using a distraction to start a fight between the two guys. Always love that when it happens in a piece of fiction. Always my favorite thing when you steal keys off a guard and then you are able to take your handcuffs off. I cheer for it every time.
Classic shit. Love it. Dick deploying the binary gas that he showed off a few issues ago to put his mask on for the distraction. It's a great little action scene as they break out of prison together. Yeah.
And I think this fight scene, I think I've mentioned this before on the pod, but Grant Morrison at one point called this particular grid, the 6-panel grid, he called it television. And you can see in this issue here why they call it television, where it's like, this is all so snappy, and then the transition from scene to scene feels very much going from an A plot to a B plot in a television show. And it doesn't feel ever like anything becomes too cinematic. It's very small screen in a very comforting way for this kind of storyline.
I want to call out this panel in particular where Vic Sage's fist emerges from between the bars to punch a guard in the face.
Yes, that's very television to me.
Yeah. Very delightful.
I really, really love that. I think it's fantastic. I think this fight scene is really beautifully drawn. Also, Renee's got some guns on her.
Yeah.
Look at her muscular ass arm. I love it.
I think it's very important to Renee's character to draw her with arms like that.
Absolutely. 100%.
So that's the little bit of Rucka we get this issue before it goes back to the Booster Gold show.
And then you just turn the page into another incredible illustration. Maybe the best Clark Kent face in the series so far.
Very Mankey-like, as you pointed out.
It is very Mankey-like. It's gorgeous.
Well, and I think that's Tom's influence, right?
Yeah.
As the inker. Because he inked him on the whole Red Hood, and for years, too.
That's right.
And so it's funny because I was flipping through it, and I'm like, oh, this looks a lot like Doug. And I flip back, and I'm like, oh, Tom inked it. I can see where a lot of the Doug-isms are shining through because of it.
Yeah, it's like when you see little bits of Darwin Cook and Amanda Connor's art. Like, oh, yeah, I know where she got that from.
Yep.
Very much the school of Mankey. So Clark Kent looks out the window. Very much that Watchmen take on the monster on the TV over here. Good call out there, Gita. And he says, this looks like a job for Supernova because that's the era we're in right now.
Yeah. I love the little thing where he's running past the supply closet and he's saying, oh, how friend. I miss you. It's so cute.
My favorite thing about this page is how they pull up the Wikipedia article for Balastro, the monster. They make you believe it like, oh yeah, he's an Aquaman villain. Literally has never appeared anywhere before this issue and will never appear again afterward. This is the only time we see this thing.
Yes. When Aquaman shows up and he has to fight this guy, he's like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, not a big deal for him.
Balastro must be Tuesday.
I mean, Aquaman is dead right now in continuity, which might be why we have to deal with stuff like this. And that gives us this big, inept fight scene between Booster and Balastro, which is just absolutely out of, like, a lot of what's going on in 52, I think, is influenced by the popularity of Justice League Unlimited, which put the spotlight on characters like The Question and Booster Gold. And one of the best episodes of that show was The Greatest Story Never Told, which a lot of people fell in love with Booster over. And that's very much what we're getting here in this Booster story of him just like chaotically trying to save Metropolis.
Yeah, the funniest thing about this scene here is that every person he saves, and he does save people, every person he saves is really mad at him for it.
How dare you?
Well, and he breaks something in the process, right? So
Yes.
car destroyed, statue beheaded, all this stuff. He's saving people, but he's trashing the city and the people stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very good comedy writing. It does feel like a superhero version of like an old screwball comedy or something. You could imagine this happening to Cary Grant.
You know what it is? It's a Zack Snyder action scene played for laughs.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah. In full color.
Yes. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite bits is when he has the great idea to electrocute him with the train rail, but the moment he does, he starts a blackout through the whole city.
We do love it. We do absolutely love it. Just
man.
it follows the rule of three, the screenplay writing rule of three also, where he tries something 3 times and the third time is the worst time.
Oh, yeah.
I love that
God.
Clark kind of sees it coming too. He's like, no. Oh.
Yeah, Clark must have such an intimate knowledge of what things will or will not destroy the electrical grid in Metropolis.
Oh, yeah. He's had experience. I mean, he's innately familiar with the electrical grid. Before he could fly, Superman got around by running across power lines. So that's always been a part of him, going back to like Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster.
That's the funniest image to have in my head right now.
Yeah.
Like a little boy just running across a power line like a bird.
Whee! And of course, that's when Supernova shows up to solve the problem easily. The nuclear sub that showed up in the middle of Metropolis when this all started, he flies through and uses it to defeat Balastro. And everybody kind of jeers Booster as much as they're cheering Supernova. My favorite is more like Booster Fold.
I always love how glowiness is illustrated in comic books. It's like something you can't actually communicate through like what a glowing light actually looks like. And Supernova is just 100% glow. Anytime he shows up, he is his own light source.
Right.
I think it looks super beautiful in the dark blue tones of the night, because you're right, like even in nighttime, Metropolis is lit by like this deep golden hue from all of the windows. So then that gets recreated in the slightly cooler tone, but still incredibly warm hues of Supernova. Really nice.
And that was what was fun, in that knocking out the power allowed me to go cool color with everything, and then Supernova be literally the light source of the scenes.
Yeah. He's the way and the light. He's the Jesus figure in this. His chest emblem is literally a crucifix.
Is it? Jesus. No, it really is.
Take a look. Look at that like elongated bottom point.
100% is. That's some Japanese RPG type shit.
Yeah. That's some Grant Morrison super gods shit they're on right now.
That super is. Booster is so upset about Supernova's existence that when Supernova shows up saving Booster, Booster's reaction is to immediately start fighting him.
He goads him a little. Supernova's being a little bit of a jerk. He's like, ignore the insults, Booster. You're not going to pay attention to these people, are you? Of course you aren't. Why start now, right? And that's what sets Booster off.
Fair enough. I mean, it's Booster Gold, though.
Yeah.
Of all the people to kick when they're down.
Yeah, this is when he goes full Frank Grimes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. He just hates this man, like soul hates. Like, he hates this person so much.
Yeah.
And he goes absolute buck wild. It is very much like an Anakin Skywalker Obi-Wan type argument, you know?
Yeah.
You were supposed to be the chosen one.
Oh, that happened the year before this, so that would be a contemporary reference.
I love the hodgepodge of like pop cultural references that show up in this comic book. I mean, that's why the Star Wars type poster would have been perfect, right? Because it, like what George Lucas was inspired by, just a hodgepodge of things that he liked when he was a boy. That's exactly what 52 is, like a stew of all these things these 4 writers have been thinking about since they were children, and their personal favorite comic book characters to play around with, like little Barbie dolls. It's a fascinating experiment.
So they're having this huge fight, and wouldn't you know it, the submarine that showed up when Balastro attacked the city is about to explode and take everyone else with it. And that's when shit gets real. Booster probably thinking about that moment a few weeks ago where Elongated Man was like, well, if you're an actual hero, then maybe try to prove it, is when he kind of takes his own impetus to extend his force field around the submarine and just take the entire explosion with him. And what follows is this really dramatic explosion, followed by a completely skeletonized Booster Gold picked up by Supernova. And it's Clark Kent himself who identifies the body, as Skeets is like, this wasn't supposed to happen. So something has gone horribly wrong.
And notably, Skeets is using Booster's real name, Michael, which nobody calls him Michael. As we all know, the rule of comic book deaths is that they are not dead unless you see a body. And here we've definitely 100% seen a skeleton, which means this is definitely not a red herring. So.
Right. Exactly. I was reading in the notes that from Mark Waid that this death scene was one of the most rewritten scenes in the entirety of 52. Because every time they were like, they're not going to believe us. If we leave any ambiguity whatsoever, they're going to say, oh, he survived somehow.
I mean, that's how I treat all deaths in all comic books, is like, this will stick for maybe 6 months if the character is not popular.
Yeah. I mean, Alex, you were talking about how Red Hood was going on at the time of this. Red Hood was the character. Jason Todd was the character everyone said would never come back to life. And even he had come back at this point.
I know. The red herring wasn't Hush, right? Because it ended up being Clayface, but that planted the seed for them to actually bring him back.
Yeah.
And create Red Hood.
Once you realize that the demand is there from the audience, it's like, you don't want to leave money lying on the table, do you?
Oh, heck yeah.
Right.
I think they're all like, wait, what? You want him back? We thought you hated the guy.
Like, you all called this phone number so many times to say you hated
okay,
this
listen
guy.
up, you little shits. Let me give you some history lesson here in defense of Jason Todd. First of all, Jason lost that vote by 72 votes. That's a ridiculous. Slim margin of error. And second of all, there is pretty concrete evidence there were auto dialers on the other side. And a lot of people were like Brexit type voters who were like, I just want to see if they're actually going to do it.
Wow.
So it's not that they hated Jason Todd. It's that there was a sensationalism about it.
I mean,
I agree.
Look at any internet poll. The edgiest answer will always win if there's not people, validating every single vote.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. I will go to my grave and eventual resurrection saying that vote was not necessarily against Jason Todd as a character.
It was like, aren't you tired of being nice? Don't you want to go apeshit?
They called DC's bluff. That's all it was.
That's all it was.
Will you kill this little boy?
Bluff. Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, I could talk for an hour about that vote, but that's not what today's episode is about.
No. Now we're going to the backup, which is a really incredible backup.
Oh my God.
Really, really like the backup for this issue.
It's one of my all-time favorites. The art is by John Bogdanov, who co-created Steel, and it's the origin story of Steel.
This is the kind of thing that gives you a little bit more hope in the idea of a extra material, like adaptations of these characters. Like, the origin of Steel seems so legible and so understandable and so not tied up into any other comic book event when you read it in this form.
It might be my favorite origin story for a legacy hero, ever, across the board.
I mean, this is the idea of what Superman is, right? The shining beacon of humanity that inspires people to live up to their potential also. Framing it works really well because the backstory of used to be a arms manufacturer until he realized that weapons kill people is cut up. It's just two panels. So then we just have from there the actual growth into a person who would be inspired by Superman and become a hero in their own right. And that takes up the vast majority of the everything else. I just think it's good. That's all I have to say.
I mean, they boil it down to literally one panel, really. That second panel in the entire thing where Superman is saving a falling John Henry from a window. And he says, I owe you my life. And Superman just responds, then make it count. That's all you need to know about who Steel is.
Yeah.
Superman saved his life, and he's spending the rest of his life being someone Superman could be proud of. And it's just such a powerful story about how these heroes actually affect us in the real world.
Absolutely. It is like metatextual, right? Because we all want to believe that we go from reading a Superman comic out into the world and being a better person like Superman and Clark Kent. I've gone on at length about how Lois Lane is like the ideal that I live up to in my head of a really annoying but extremely effective journalist.
Yeah.
I also think like Steel being a black guy so matters, and part of it is this idea of being a beacon, a pillar in your own community, standing, like walking the walk alongside talking the talk. It does give him like kind of Unk vibes, like he's kind of an old head, and you can tell, but he does feel very familiar. His sense of personal responsibility for the well-being of people around him, that feels very familiar. And the entire origin, the way it's written here, that becomes like a cornerstone of the character.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that whole old head Steel perspective is very much the core of Christopher Priest's run on Steel in the 90s, with Natasha representing the modern perspective. And he just plays into that in a really cool way. Yeah. And it's one of the storylines recommended here. It's the Return of Superman, then the Steel series, and then 52, because this is the third big thing he was in. But yeah, Steel rules. Maybe my favorite member of the Superman family after Superman himself. Such a cool guy.
It's just a cool type of dude also, right? Like in the same way that Jon Stewart is a cool type of dude, like where you would think this guy was cool even if he wasn't literally a superhero.
Right. He's the kind of guy who, when you find out he's a superhero, you go, oh, of course.
Alex, were you doing colors on this backup, or was this one of the ones you begged off for?
This is me.
Oh, this is you?
Oh,
incredible work yet again.
Thank you. And it's funny because I'm looking at it and I can think it's like, man, I made him too shiny. Steel's not that shiny. I guess if you polish it, it gets that shiny.
Yeah.
But I must have just finished doing the Astro City story with, what's his name?
Steel Jacket.
Steel Jacket, yeah. And so I made him pretty shiny and reflective because that was the directive I got from Alex Ross. So I thought I'll just do the same thing here.
No, it works here because these 2-page intros are kind of like about presenting each of these heroes at their absolute best, at their most like iconic and totemic. It really nails like this is the essential origin of this important character in the universe that you need to get to know. Because part of the impetus of 52 is introducing you to all of these side players that you wouldn't necessarily know otherwise if you're only familiar with Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. So yeah, you want to shine Steel up. This is his Sunday best.
He looks good all shiny.
Yeah. Maybe not for every
obviously,
day.
I'm looking at like the brushed steel background I threw on there too. I don't do that too often.
It looks really good though.
Gita, did you have a favorite scene this issue?
Gosh, my favorite scene this issue, it's gotta be when Booster is pulling the woman out of the car and she's like, "Get your hands off me, you perv." I love that one.
How about you, Alex? Anything stand up to you on this reread?
I'm trying to think what I actually gravitate to the sequence of him holding the power thing and then boom, it just goes dead. And Clark
so
just
good.
Dropping his head like
so close.
Artistically, it allowed me to because one of the things visually that I do a lot is I change palettes or palette moods depending on the scene so that the reader just kind of realizes, oh wait, new scene. And so if, in particular, I had been doing very bright saturated colors in the Booster Gold scenes in the series. And so the fact that I could come in and just boom, drop the mood and then use Supernova as the spotlight became something that was like, I obviously made the decision back then, but picking up on it going like, oh, that was a good decision, man.
Yeah, you were cooking on that one. Congrats to you.
But that one page where he's like, he's a badass, he's holding the cable and then poof, it just goes out.
That's the beautiful comic timing of this book. Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah, I think that's probably just because of that moment. Because, you've lived so many moments like that or seen many moments like that on TV.
Yes, exactly. Movies. Me, when I'm playing Splatoon 3 and my internet goes out.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. I mean, for me, this is an easy answer because since I saw that Steel backup in 2006, that panel of Superman rescuing Steel falling out the window has been stuck in my mind every time I think about those characters. So like I can't not say that specific page. It's just part of comics to me. It's in the canon, and like part of why I love this series of backups so much. And I kind of wish they were still doing something like this somewhere, because they keep making new characters, and these old characters keep getting new stories. People need to be updated without having to read a 10,000 page long wiki article. You need somebody who can summarize it for you. Here are the important points, and here's who this character is. And this piece just gets to the core of Steel so elegantly.
I agree 100%.
I think we go to the Blackboard next. Is that correct?
I think so. It's time to throw something up on our metaphorical Blackboard. This is just something from the issue that is like a far-flung part of DC lore that maybe like hasn't been explored, or possibly has been, as Alex Jaffe will tell us. And for me, the thing that I'm the most curious about is, one, the fact that Wikipedia definitely 100% exists in the universe of DC. How different is it from normal Wikipedia? And I mean, I'm sure Lex Luthor is paying people to write his Wikipedia page for him, right? In the same way that most people that are that famous have someone write their Wikipedia page for them. What's the edit war situation on like Lex Luthor's Wikipedia page, for example?
I mean, I won't get into all of the problems with the video game Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, but the most interesting thing about it to me is that the in-game codex is written by Lex Luthor. So all of the bios in the game are like Lex's perspective on Wonder Woman. It's pretty fun.
I would probably think that Lex owns Wikipedia, and so that he makes sure whatever's under is very pro him.
Yeah. And, of course. And he puts up those windows like, your donations keep Lexipedia running.
Yeah. It's like Shell Corporation after Shell Corporation after Shell Corporation. They own Lexipedia. They must be so big and annoying in the DC universe also. And also purple and green.
Yeah, they display like 3 lines of text at a time in between Subaru ads.
Oh, Lord.
It's like, what if the Fandom Corporation bought Wikipedia for real?
Yes, exactly. Oh my God. Yeah. The DC Wikipedia is fandom. It's, what a nightmare. Well, what I want to throw on the board is, first of all of the effort that they went through, that Mark and Greg and Grant and everyone else went through to make sure nobody called bullshit on this death, absolutely did not work. Because I went to the message boards that were written, the message board posts that people were writing at the time, and everyone was sharing their fan theories about how Booster survived. A bunch of them guessed time travel stuff, because that's kind of Booster's deal. But my favorite theory, which turned out to be completely not true, is the idea that this Booster is a counterpart from the multiverse. And the Booster who left in the OMAC project before Infinite Crisis, our Booster never came back. And this Booster who came back during Infinite Crisis and into 52 is some other universe's Booster. And the reason we see that Lex Luthor article in the first page of this issue was a hint, them telling us, oh, this is also a multiverse Booster. Now, that turned out not to be true at all.
That's a great theory, though.
But I really love that theory. Yeah.
Anytime you bring multiversal nonsense into a comic book, you know people that the sickos that really love that stuff are going to latch onto it really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is I mentioned the News Time magazine, which DC put out in 1993, and that the cover made me think of, which was this retrospective on the death of Superman, how it affected people in universe. It's on the DC Universe Infinite app. You can read it now easily. It's this just great 32-page collection filled with like in-universe ads. There's an ad for Ferris Aircraft, for like in-universe cartoons and beers and Wayne Tech and LexCorp and letters to the editor and society sections. But there's also a bunch of articles on how the death of Superman affected us and how Doomsday's devastation affected us as people. And they got a mix of testimonials from real people and fake superheroes talking about how Superman affected them. So alongside Bruce Wayne and Wonder Woman and Lex Luthor, you have these little obituaries written by Dan Rather and William Shatner and Penn Jillette, and a really stirring one by John Goodman. where he talks about how he had to fight Mr. Mxyzptlk.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, he like wrote a little Superman story in his obituary. And it's just such a fantastic read and just like a different way to make this universe feel real. That is something that 52 itself is getting at by showing us this weekly window into a persistent universe. Obviously, it's not a sustainable thing. People don't want to read 32 pages of pure text every month. But it was such a cool idea for them to do at the time around this major event. And it's something that's just a really standout artifact of that period when everybody in comics was talking about the same storyline.
Well, that rocks.
Yeah.
I do wonder if, what does Lois think of News Time magazine? Is she always promoting the soft little magazine writers? Like,
yeah, I
bet. With your little monthly columns, I'm here getting the real news.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what's fun is that the columns are attributed to the actual writers of like Superman comics who contributed their own text pieces to it. So they're in the universe as the News Time writers.
That's wonderful.
Like Roger Stern, who was a major Superman writer, wrote a bunch of articles.
Cool.
Yeah, it's such a neat little artifact. Reading this issue again, Alex, what comes to mind for you? Like, what did this conjure memories of or questions about?
A lot of that, like I said, it was like the first year of me going full freelance and just putting the work in and really just going from one issue to the next. I had to do a lot of research on it on my back end as far as like I don't even remember how many I ended up coloring because I do know that David Barron and Hi-Fi jumped in at some point and had to help out with issues. And I think those were the times when...
those were the times where he carried you.
We would get fill-ins because that week was when I was going to be coloring an issue of Astro City or whatever book I was on at the time.
Oh.
And so I think I did go the first 30 straight.
Wow.
On my own and then cried uncle.
30's very respectable.
Yeah, no, I think you did your due diligence. Wow.
Yeah, that's what, 7 months and a couple weeks, 7.5 months straight.
Yeah, I think you missed one in those first 30. David Barron colored number 9. But okay. Apart from that, yeah, you did 31, 32, 33, and then you took a break till 37.
Okay.
Gosh, wow.
It's still extremely respectable. I don't know how many people can claim coloring that much of a weekly series that lasted a year. I think that's a pretty singular feat in mainstream comics.
Yeah, and I think that was it. I was going for I'm going to do as many as I can. Let's see how many I can get done.
Yeah, that's a game you can play with yourself when you're like established in your career, but also pretty early on. I remember when I used to work at a video game website where I had to blog daily, I would be like, let's see how many blogs I can do today. And I would get up to like 5. And then, by the time I hit 30, I was like, I could maybe write twice a week or else my brain's going to leak out my ears. I don't know how I used to do that stuff.
Yeah. There's also a little bit of me hearing the editors at that meeting saying, are we sure he can handle this? That was, I think, my ego saying, oh, he can handle this.
Yeah, no, I definitely never want to admit when I'm wrong or that I might not be able to do something. If right. You think that I can't do something, that I'm going to freaking do it if I die.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of the energy that motivated 52 in the first place. Like, see if we can't do this.
Yeah.
It was basically a dare. And the fact that it worked out at all is still miraculous to me.
Yeah. It's nice to see that energy is infused like all throughout the project. Like, let's just treat a comic book as a TV show. And TV shows are already hard enough to make. So let's just do it. What's the worst could go wrong? Yeah,
you know how hard comics are to make. What if we made it even harder? You want to stick around while we answer some fan mail, Alex?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
Awesome.
All right. In that case, that takes us to Asking the Questions. This is our feature where you can write into 52mailbag@gmail.com to submit your own thoughts and inquiries for us about 52 or DC Comics or just culture or anything you want to grill our broken, melting brains about. This first one comes from Spencer, who asks, who determines who is the world's greatest detective, and what does it take to qualify?
I like the idea of them all sitting down to take a qualification test.
Yeah.
It's Mr. Terrific, Vic, and Bruce just in a room glaring at each other.
I think Vic would bow out. He's like, no, it's not me.
I'm just happy to be here.
Exactly.
They're too afraid of Batman to say that it's them.
Yeah. No, Mr. Terrific would take the test as many times as it took to beat Batman.
We know that in Batman, the Brave and the Bold, the cartoon, Batman determined that the world's greatest detective is in fact Sherlock Holmes, which is fair. I think Detective Chimp is the inside fandom answer on who the world's greatest detective is. But in terms of publication, the first time Batman was called the world's greatest detective was on the cover of 1949's Detective Comics number 146, which billed Batman and Robin as the world's greatest detective team. And it was kind of a marketing blurb from that ever since. Batman only started calling himself that in like 1970. And usually it's like, I'm the world's greatest detective. Why can't I figure this out? It's usually kind of self-effacing. But yeah, the answer is basically marketing copy. That's who determines who the world's greatest detective is.
I mean, for Batman to be the world's greatest detective, as true as that is, I feel like Bruce Wayne does also have a marketing team workshopping phrases on Batman.
That's true. Yes. He didn't come up with the Dark Knight on his own.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Lucy in marketing came up with that one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She's got a couple of different options, maybe, if you want to do another take on this. But we, focus testing all agrees that Dark Knight really tests best with your main demographic, which is criminals who are fearful of the light.
There's like this one Wayne Enterprises guy. He's like, hey, I have a question. Why are we doing marketing for Batman? You're fired. All right. Our next question comes from Luca, who says, as a guy from Brazil, I had a lot of moments when trying to get into comics of looking at lists of Brazilian characters and thinking if it's an accurate or at least interesting representation, but I've never found much that goes beyond the basic Brazil mentioned feeling. Most characters, like Fire or Sunspot, kind of feel like they could be from anywhere. Your discussion about the Chinese superheroes in New Superman, as well as the Middle East and Adriana, got me thinking if there are any other runs you think did something cool with characters foreign from the US. Do you have any favorites? Has there been any change on the way superhero comics approach non-US centric stories? Thank you for the podcast and all the work you put into it.
No, thank you.
Yeah, this was a lovely message to get.
The big major change, and I think why we get to see so many more examples of really cool international heroes recently, is the Own Stories initiative, right? Where the idea is, let's hire writers from these cultures to write about what it's like to be from that culture.
Exactly.
So that really helps.
Yeah, you get New Superman because Gene Luen Yang is writing it.
Yeah. Exactly.
I've made a list of some you might want to check out. Batwing number 1 through 18 are set in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Pretty good. Joshua Dysart's Unknown Soldier in Uganda. Obviously, all the Hellblazer stuff for a very UK-centric comic book.
It is such a specific time and place vibe, those Hellblazer books, especially the super early ones. It's like, let's just distill the misery of Margaret Thatcher's London into one comic book. You can tell also in the way that Hellblazer shows up in Sandman, you can tell how much Neil Gaiman really wanted him to feel like a uniquely English and especially like a Londoner character.
Yes.
Yeah, it is time and place and mood just all working together. Like that's why they pay Neil Gaiman the big bucks.
Yeah, it's a mistake to think of Constantine. That's right, I said Constantine as dirtbag Doctor Strange. He's more very much like fuck the monarchy guy.
He's a Gen X guy.
Yeah.
He's very much a bitter Gen X guy. I feel like he's one of the ones
punk.
that should age in real time, right? Like he has to be a punk.
He is. I want to talk about Batman the World, a really interesting one-shot, which had a bunch of different creators from different countries, kind of like the Star Wars visions of Batman, doing different stories about Batman in countries around the world. There's going to be a sequel soon this year called The Joker the World, which is going to do the same thing but with Joker. I'm looking forward to that.
That sounds sick.
The 2006 Blue Beetle series is set in El Paso, but has a very, it's very entrenched in, Mexican-American culture, and I think is a really interesting look at all of that. There was an obscure event in 2000 called Planet DC, which didn't really go anywhere, but all of these annuals about different heroes from around the world. This is all to say that it has been done, but we could be seeing a lot more.
Hopefully we do see more.
Yeah.
As more diverse creators get into comics, hopefully we'll see more interesting characters from interesting parts of the world.
Yeah, comic book fandom is huge in Brazil in particular, and it's wild to me that DC has Fire, but hasn't really done anything with her to connect with that Brazilian story.
It is a little too bad.
Yeah, but that's where we are. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything you're working on now that you'd like to tell us about? I know I've been going through the newly reissued Metro book collections of Astro City, which are just wonderful to read, all collected like that.
I'm glad we're collecting those again. And
yeah,
hopefully we're going to be leading those into new Astro City stuff.
Ooh. Astro
Yes.
City is a book that I bought as a gift for my older brother to show him that comic books were cool.
Yes.
So I'm excited to gift him another copy as an adult.
I have long called Astro City the only sequel to Watchmen that matters.
No, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely. There's been a lot of Watchmen responses or post-Watchmen books. Astro City is the one that digs into the thing that I actually did kind of want more of from Watchmen. Watching such a complete story, it's like hard to say that anything could have been done better. But
Right.
I always wish that I got to have more of the preamble of the heroes living their lives and the weird problems that they run into from having superpowers.
Yeah. It's so wonderful. So what are you working on now in your almost 20 years into your freelancer era?
So I am finishing off the last issue of the Wolverine Sabretooth saga, Sabretooth War saga, which was kind of labeled as the most violent Wolverine story ever told.
Sick.
I'm here to attest to the fact that it is pretty freaking violent.
Yeah.
I was about to say, you got a lot of cool textures to play with. Now it's like, well, you got a lot of organs to color.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. You know what color every internal organ is.
Yes.
There was definitely a phone call, and my question was like, okay, how real am I doing this blood? How much do I need to hide?
It was like, how much of this blood becomes shadow as I color?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but a great read. The art's incredible, and it's again one of these where it comes out every 2 weeks, and so I'm again doing what we were just talking about. I'm working with multiple artists.
Oh, cool. So you get to be a unifier on the book to sort of make things feel really coherent.
Yep.
That rocks.
Yeah.
So I'm finishing that up. After this, I pick up an X-Men project and then a Spider-Man project, both of which haven't been announced, so I can't.
Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out for your name on these announcements.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see them. I love your work, dude. It was such a pleasure to have you on.
Oh,
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
it's great. I
absolutely.
mean, it's fun to reminisce and go back to something that was such a massive undertaking. And I think, like I said during our talks, is like the covers, really. If you say, what was your favorite thing about 52? It's like that interaction with J.G. Jones. We built a friendship around it. When they issued the hardcover, collecting all the covers, at that time, they weren't paying colorist royalties. But JG had it written into his contract for that book that a portion
that's so cool.
of his royalties would get cut to me.
What a mensch.
What a fucking stand-up dude. That rocks.
Yeah.
The more I hear about J.G. Jones, the more I love him.
Yeah, no, he's an amazing human being, a super talented guy, and someone, like I said, that we spoke on a weekly basis and really put our hearts into each cover.
You can see it. You can I mean, one of the most impactful things about 52 is that it feels like a lot of wildly different artists collaborating to make something that does feel very complete. And you can feel that especially on the covers, which are all so different from each other, but feel like they all belong to the same series and they're all part of the same story, which is an incredibly difficult task. And is also an incredibly difficult one to do if there's more than one person touching every single page.
Right.
Oh, Lord. All right. Gita, do you have any questions for me?
So my one question that I have for you, Alex, is are you ready?
Gita, I have never in my entire life, up until this moment, until the moment that I die, not been ready.
Wow. Born ready. 52 Pickup is an Aftermath production created by Gita Jackson and Alex Jaffe and edited by Esper Quim with original music by John Ahrens. The views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the show's personalities and do not reflect those of DC Entertainment or Warner Brothers. Please rate and review our show wherever you can and send your questions and comments to 52mailbag@gmail.com. Never stop reading comics.